Let's preview the Pacers rotation for this coming season, why it could be a little harder to figure out than you think, more specifics than you think, and could there be any surprises? We'll break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're talking all things rotation for the Pacers this coming season. It's a little easier than most years to break down the minutes outlay for a lot of players, but a little harder to get the combinations all right. It will not be as much hockey subby as past seasons, I think, and we'll have to get into why, plus potential surprises that could sneak up. Players who typically aren't discussed in this context, could they be in there? What could shake up if things change in any way? All sorts of that stuff. This is probably the easiest year of this, so we're going to get a lot more granular. For those of you watching, and this could even be the case listening because there's no carpet in this room. Yes, I am on a trip. This is not the normal background. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to see the Phillies play. Can't wait. But you will see a different background for the next few episodes, including a player interview tomorrow, already recorded, and Friday's show. So be on the lookout and listen out. Let's start with the easy way of doing this, right? And I am going to project my own feelings a bit here, but I have a strong hunch it'll be this way. And I have a strong hunch it'll be this way because the Pacers' actions match this and the results match this. But if you want to start by looking at the Pacers' rotation, the place to start is the starters. Who's going to start? And the big three are the locks, right? Tyrese Haliburton's going to start. Myles Turner's going to start. Pascal Siakam's going to start. And I think the whole starting five should be in a pretty close to pen. If you guys remember, if those of you who have been listening every day for a while, back in November, after the Pacers traded Buddy Hield, and really even in January, after they traded for Siakam, but they still had Buddy Hield for a little bit, I argued the starting five should be as it is, or as it was for the most of the rest of that season. Haliburton, Nembhard, and Nesmith for the defense, Siakam, and Turner. To me, that is the best combination the Pacers have of doing the following things. Maximizing lineups with Tyrese Haliburton, getting as much defense with Haliburton on the floor as possible, getting Siakam in a lineup that makes the most sense, and allowing the bench to still make sense and work. A lot of that was unlocked when Obi Toppin started hitting threes and he wasn't a required starter. A lot of that was unlocked by TJ McConnell becoming the best isolation scorer and driver in the NBA for the last month of last season. But even before some of that stuff kind of all came together, that was the starting lineup that made the most sense to me. And when the Pacers landed on it, clearly they agreed to some extent because they ran it for a while. They ran it into the playoffs, only changing it when Haliburton got hurt and Ben Shepherd had to start in his place in the conference finals. And so I have no reason to believe that that would not be the case. I would point everybody to the direction of an interview that Mark Medina did in Sports Keto with Todd Ramasar. That's one of Andrew Nembhard and Pascal Siakam's agents. And he talks about this. It's not really gone into much detail, but he talks about Carlisle's minutes kind of approach and how it kept Pacers players fresh for the postseason. I'm not going to read the quote verbatim. I'm not going to go through the whole article. I'd recommend you read it. It's very good. Great get from Mark Medina to get that all on the record. But part of that was mentioned. And I do think the Pacers, who don't have anyone last year who played more than like a little over 32 minutes, are going to drastically change that this year. Mostly because, why would they? It worked for them last year, but also because they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of mouths to feed in terms of minutes. It seems like they'll be a team that would play 10 guys. They have their best players who have had seasons with injuries in the past, basically everybody but Siakam in their starting five. So that makes a lot of sense to still be the case. And so if you're going to start from a couple assumptions that they're going to continue to manage minutes in a similar way, that they're going to start the same group that they landed on last year that worked well for them and produced good results, that they're still going to be prioritizing winning this year, which seems super obvious, which was not necessarily the case heading into the season last year. It seems really clear to me that the best place to start building the Pacers rotation is to throw those five names that I've already said into a starting five and put their minutes from last year in as placeholder values. And what that lands you at is 32 minutes for Tyrese Haliburton, 25 minutes for Andrew Nembhard, 28 minutes for Aaron Nesmith, 32 minutes for Pascal Siakam, and 27 minutes for Myles Turner. And that the first glance things that stood out to me was compared to normal starters, that's low minutes for Nembhard and that's low minutes for Turner. But Turner played more games last year, a lot more games last year. Right? Myles Turner played the 5th most minutes per game on the Pacers last year, really 4th. Bruce Brown landed 3rd, and he ended up getting traded away. And if you look at Turner's career minutes per game, 27.0 is what he landed on last year, which that's his 2nd lowest season ever. His rookie season was the only year with less. He was at 28 or more every year after his rookie season till last year. Also, though, last year was the first time he played over 70 games since 2018-19. The first time he played more than 62 games since 2018-19. I don't know that there's a correlation, but I can tell you those things consecutively and say, hey, that kind of worked. Maybe they should do that again. Nembhard's the other one that you go, 25 minutes for a starter. And he's the guy that maybe you think about, he's a good player. He defends well. That could go up. They just gave him an extension. He played less minutes last year than did as a rookie. But the guys right behind him at his position are also worthy of minutes. And so it's hard for me to pull the rug out from any of those players and say that minutes allocation looks wrong. If it's a close game, they need the clutchness. Maybe Haliburton gets up to 38, 35, whatever. Siakam, same deal. Myles Turner up to 32. Aaron Nesmith, Nembhard, they could approach 30 in the right matchups. But nothing about that sits funny with me. That seems like a good, last year, outline and framework of what they should start with. And so that leaves, once again, a very clear fill in the bench kind of thing. This isn't like past seasons, right? Last year, you'd build the starting 5 with Mathurin in there, and then you'd sprinkle in some minutes for Nembhard at the 1 and some minutes for Nembhard at the 2 and some minutes for Mathurin at the 2 and the 3. And maybe we could play Nesmith at these couple spots. And wait, what about, you don't have to do that this year. It's so much cleaner if that's a starting 5. You have 16 to 18 minutes for TJ McConnell as your backup 1. That might feel low after how good he closed the season. Guess what? He finished last season at 18 minutes per game. And if he overlaps with Haliburton even for 2 minutes, you can get him to 18 again. You have 23 minutes behind Andrew Nembhard for Ben Mathurin. That hit me as a little low when I typed it in. And he finished last season at 26 minutes per game. So that's one that might require creativity, but it's not that hard to do. At the 3, behind Aaron Nesmith's 28 minutes, you'd have Ben Sheppard at 20 minutes. That might feel a bit high. We'll get to him later. He finished last season at 14 minutes per game, although he's coming into his 2nd season. Maybe he is in line for a bigger role, but a very easy way to get Mathurin some more minutes. Toss him some of those Ben Sheppard minutes. Behind Pascal Siakam, though, you would have Obi Toppin at 16 minutes. That one hit me as low as well, and he finished last season at 21. That one's a little harder to up easily. And then behind Myles Turner at the 5, if he has at 27 minutes again, that would put Isaiah Jackson at 21. That is much over his average from last year, which does include some garbage time games. He finished last year at 13. Perhaps that's a way to get Toppin more minutes as he plays some minutes as the reserve 5. Perhaps you can get Mathurin to his number from last year by shifting some of Sheppard's his way. And hey, in some ways, it's kind of easy. You can build the same general rotation as last year with about the same minutes per game as last year with very little creativity. The same guys back up the same guys. We've seen these units work. We saw the starting 5 work. We saw the second unit work. As soon as Obi Toppin could hit 3s, he could fit with anybody. As soon as McConnell figured out all this new moves, he could fit with anybody. Ben Sheppard can guard. He can make 3s. It all clicked. Isaiah Jackson was good in the playoffs. So there we go. Is it that simple? Maybe. But I don't necessarily know that this year is the year to just finish the project like that. And again, in past years, this project ended with the second segment coming up would be, well, if Nembhard plays 5 minutes at shooting guard and 10 minutes at point guard and 3, then he could get to 18, and then Mathurin could play. But that was confusing. What I think is a better value exercise this year, because it's much easier to construct the 10 guys in the rotation and their minutes and their position, is actually seeing who should play with who and how that should influence sub patterns. I think that's going to be more interesting for the Pacers and became a story to me at times in the postseason last year. Let's dive into that using some numbers, using some data, and using some principles that I would like to think about if I'm constructing the Pacers rotation. Hey, everybody, before we talk about that, we need to talk about the lovely folks over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love sports so much I never want them to stop. That's why the summertime can be so tough. The playoffs wind down for the NBA. The NFL hasn't restarted yet. The NHL is done. The WNBA takes a couple weeks off for the Olympics. The MLB has the All-Star break. Oh, the sports just aren't sportsing like I want them to. Thankfully, FanDuel keeps the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do, open the app and dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood this summer. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with a daily boost or bonus on FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Warriors. Hear about the Warriors side of the Lowry market and fallout. All the discussion on the Jazz, their team filling that out. Where do they go now? They just signed Oscar Tshiebwe. You could check out Locked On Jazz for that. But Locked On Warriors, what do they do now? They had all this hangover there. Steph looked amazing in the Olympics, but that team doesn't look amazing. They have too many guys to play. Someone good is not going to play for Golden State. Locked On Warriors will have all the answers to these questions. Here at Locked On Pacers, speaking of too many guys to play, we're talking about their rotation. Pacers probably don't have too many guys to play, but they do have some questions and answers to have with their rotation. Let's get into more specifics, right? In the past, it's been very easy to generalize about the rotation and do the exercise I just described of giving guys various numbers of minutes at various different positions. Maybe you could do that with Nembhard, but everybody seems pretty locked into what they've got. So I'm going to talk about some principles that I would be thinking about if I'm the Pacers. Something I've talked about a lot is Obi Toppin and what made him grow into a piece the Pacers should be very happy to keep. And that was his ability to not have to play, requirement play with Tyrese Haliburton, right? When he came here, the discussion last summer a lot of the time with him and Bruce Brown and all their additions was like, oh, these guys are great in transition. They're great fits with how we want to play. This is wonderful. And that's true. And I don't think that should be minimized. And Obi Toppin started the season as a starter because the thinking was, what a stylistically great fit. But their style was a lot Tyrese Haliburton. And when Toppin became better as a bench player and wasn't required to be with Tyrese Haliburton, that changed everything for the Pacers. He could play with McConnell. He could play with the second unit. Things were good. That said, that's all true. They kept Obi. That's what I would have done. Everything's great. That said, let me run you some numbers. Obi Toppin and Tyrese Haliburton together, the Pacers had a plus 7.3 net rating last year with a 127 offensive rating. Their defense stunk, 120. But their offense was amazing. With Haliburton on the floor and Toppin off, that offensive rating drops to 121.3. Drops is funny because that's still a terrific number. Defensive rating at 117.6. So that's a plus 3.7 net rating. Still very good. Haliburton can fit with anybody, but worse. Toppin, no Haliburton, 119.3 offensive rating. That's worse than both the numbers I said. 119.28, so a little bit lower. Defensive rating. That's a positive 0.03 net rating. And again, that's a huge deal that number is above zero, but still much lower than that plus 7 point something. Both of them off their net rating. The Pacers net last year was just about minus 0.5. So I bring all those numbers up to say, everything I've said about Toppin, I still believe to be true. That said, he's still very clearly, as an above-the-rim play finisher, as a transition weapon, as a shooter, is maximized playing with Tyrese Haliburton. And that's why something the Pacers did in the playoffs last year, I think, will be relevant this year. Toppin came in first a lot. He was the first sub to come in, sometimes with McConnell, but either way, he was in that duo. He was the first sub to come in, sometimes for the center, sometimes for Siakam, who'd come back in when Haliburton came out, whatever it has to be. I think that whatever is reasonable, it's not possible. He's not going to start, right? Because Siakam's on the team. But whatever's reasonable percentage-wise, the Pacers need the highest possible percentage of Obi Toppin's minutes to be with Tyrese Haliburton as possible, because he's not the best defender, and he does pair well with other units. That's good. But he is the maximum value player for the Pacers if he is paired with a top-tier offensive and open floor engine. And yes, the Pacers defense suffers in those minutes, but the amount their defense suffers and gets worse compared to normal is a lower difference than their offensive growth. Now, that wouldn't be a permanent gap widening, or else they would just play them both for 48 minutes, but there is something to that. And so I think to get more specific about the rotation, I would not be surprised if even if he isn't the sixth man, air quotes, in terms of touches, in terms of minutes, in terms of points, I would still not be surprised if Obi Toppin is the first sub in for Pacers in a lot of games. And it could be for Myles Turner, even if he gets some backup 5 minutes to make that minutes between him and Isaiah Jackson make more sense. Because obviously, if you're just doing inverse math of a 10-man rotation, you get more minutes for Jackson than Toppin. That doesn't make much sense. Thing two that I'm going to have as a principle for the Pacers: never, ever should they. Maybe it'll happen for like the smallest amount of time ever, but very infrequently should either or should both of Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton not be in the game. They have enough guys who can handle to get away with it for like sneezes. Ben Mathurin will be returning, right? He barely overlapped with healthy Haliburton and Siakam last year. Right? They had a month and a half with all three guys on the team, but I think Haliburton was actually playing real minutes for 10 games tops, right? They don't have a good sample of that, but Mathurin should be playing with one of them. And so specifically, the minutes that one of Haliburton or Siakam was off, Mathurin should be there. And he can handle some ball handling load. Obviously, so can McConnell and Nembhard. But one of them should always be there. That's someone who can be a fulcrum. That's someone who is a high-quality late shot clock play finisher. That's someone who draws defensive attention. Right? That matters so much. Just a force, an organizing something that causes a defense to react or think or go, oh, there's that guy. We got, that matters so much. And so, yes, you can have all this other stuff, but that's why that goes back to the Toppin thing. If Toppin's coming in first, take Siakam out. And then when Haliburton's subbing later in the quarter, bring Siakam in, bring Mathurin in also. And then you have enough ball handling and you have enough power on the floor to still be at your best. And they got better at that. And Carlisle talked about throughout the season having them together and one of them on the floor as much as possible. But they got better at that as Haliburton got healthier and they could figure all that out. But that is a near requirement now. Like with winning being the goal, one of them has to be out there all the time. Both of them also as frequently as you can. They are obviously both incredibly talented. Mixing up the bench is going to be interesting because it's something that I think the Pacers will be battling, for lack of a better term, this year, will be that everyone's better with Haliburton, right? There's a few guys that aren't better, air quotes, like McConnell is maybe better when he can have the rock, for example. But so many guys on this team, Ben Shepherd, Isaiah Jackson, Obi Toppin, are going to be better when they are paired with Tyrese Haliburton. So how do they mix up the bench in a way that is meaningful for everyone to be at their best? They can't do as many hockey sub lineups, right? And it is a good thing that their bench fit really well together last year because when Haliburton was hurt, they always had two good units. Those pairings made sense. That's why Rick Carlisle was very hesitant to break it up when a starter would get hurt and the way he made subs. That's all great. I still believe all that to be true. But they have to be careful with how they specifically approach that this year. And I think they should mix and match just a little bit more. Mathurin, though, is the most interesting part of that because how they bring Mathurin along, he's kind of this in-between player on a team that's trying to win and is establishing a rotation of success and winning at the highest level possible. Well, they need to develop him in a way where he fits with the team inside those gaps. How can they do that, right? What does that actually look like? He's one that I think is interesting because in my head, I want to see him, if I'm the Pacers, I want to see him with Tyrese Haliburton as much as I possibly can for the reasons I just said. Most players are better with him. Plus, with the long-term future of the Pacers, you want as much data of those two guys together as possible. But he might be better when he can have the ball more, right? So you kind of don't want Siakam out there. You don't want guys who are going to handle the ball as much, but then the team might be a little worse. Or do you want Mathurin out there with neither of the stars out there so you can have as many chances as possible? But then how much team success data are you really getting? So there's kind of pros and cons to both. So he's the only guy that I kind of feel like there's no obvious principle to here's who you need to have Ben Mathurin out there with. My goal as the Pacers would be specifically Haliburton I want to see him with, but in general, I want Mathurin situations where he can be Ben Mathurin because that is when he is at his best. And then from there, I work backwards of blending him with the team. Obviously, it's his third season and winning is more important. But if they're going to maximize him, growth is important. And that's my starting point for my Pacers rotation there. My last kind of question and specific of rotation building for the Pacers is who could play the five with when Isaiah Jackson's not the backup five. And I don't mean like play James Wiseman instead, right? That's obvious. And that's going to happen when there's injuries. Don't get me wrong. James Wiseman's earned those opportunities. Pacers think he can do it. That's great. But specifically, when they go smaller. What does that look like? Is it Toppin at the 5? Is it Siakam Neesmith front court? Is it Siakam Toppin front court? Is it Toppin someone else, right? Whatever that looks like, because that is the most that's wrong kind of part of this. If you break out all the minutes in the way I did to start this exercise, Siakam at 32 minutes, Toppin at 16, and then Turner at 27 with Jackson 21, that's wrong. That's just wrong. Toppin should play more than Jackson. But how? Right? It's not easy when you have a really good starting front court. And so the non-Jackson at the 5 minutes, whether that's small ball, whether that's something else, whatever that shakes out to be, maybe Jarrett sneaks in there. We're about to talk about him. That is what the most interesting question to me that popped up in my head after writing all this out. Everything else I could figure out pretty easily. How to get this guy the right amount of minutes. Who should I pair this guy with? How to, blah, blah, blah. That's the only thing that I thought, I wonder how they'll approach that. Last year, they had Jalen Smith. Obviously, things were different. Turner played more some games than others. That all makes a ton of sense. Jalen Smith was at 17 minutes per game last year as the backup 5, right? If you use that number instead of Jackson's 13, you're still 4 minutes away. So how they blend all that will be fascinating, and I am curious to see what it looks like. Last thing to talk about here, surprises, question mark? It seems like there's always one that could be in the mix or some big question. Let's figure those out to close out this Locked On Pacers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Sixers, because I'm here in Philly and saw some Sixers close today. There's a Wilt Chamberlain mural like 30 feet from this window that I'm sitting next to. It's very cool. And Keith Pompey does a great job covering the Sixers and hosting Locked On Sixers. As we talk more rotationally, every year I get something either a little wrong most of the time or majorly wrong last year. Last year I thought Jarrett would play, and I thought he'd play a lot. He didn't play at all. That was wrong. But like Jordan Nwora played the preseason. I did a whole segment about that. 2 years ago, I thought O'Shea would play, and he didn't, and then he did, and then he didn't again. It was very interesting, but he ended up, I think he led the team in games played that year, but his minutes outlay did not end up, really matching that. I want to double check that now because I might have just said something wrong, but you just never know. Yes, O'Shea Brissett was the only player to play more than 55 games for the Pacers 2 seasons ago, but the things shift. Duarte ends up being worse, after his rookie year. How do they manage those minutes all of a sudden? Oh, this guy got traded. There's always some surprise. It either comes because someone's awesome, or because someone's worse than expected, or because there's a trade, the roster changes, whatever. Again, last year, Duarte was an influence there. My O'Shea Brissett affinity for his skill set changed. There's just a lot that can change things. I don't need to get too into the weeds here. Jordan Nwora joins the team. Turns out he's like a really good scorer. All sorts of stuff can change things. If I'm going to try to predict what those could be, which means in theory, they would not be a surprise. Duh. If I can guess, it's not a surprise. But I just want to sniff some stuff that I when I was, again, typing all this down and getting all my notes together, I was like, One was Andrew Nembhard's minutes. If you pencil him in as a starting 2 at the same minutes as last year, which is how we started this, you get 25. And that might be fine. They have a lot of other ball handlers in the mix. McConnell, Haliburton, Neesmith on the wing, Ben Shepherd, Mathurin. Great. Also, I'm high on him. I think he's very good. His defense is good. And they just gave him a contract extension, which suggests that they also think he's good. What if he ends up playing a little more? I don't know how that could. There's a lot of ways that could look, right? More at the 2, some backup 1 minutes. Put it together however you want to. I think there's a lot of ways that could actually shake out in structure. But that's one that I thought, 25 feels maybe right, but if he's a starting 2 or he's a very good starting 2, what does that actually look like? What does that actually mean for Andrew Nembhard? Number 2, and the other part of that Nembhard coin, sorry to go back to my notes, is if he does play more, who's playing less, right? Is it McConnell? Is it Mathurin? Is it Ben Shepherd? That feels like the obvious one, but if Ben Shepherd plays less for Nembhard, he's not playing less for Mathurin. It's just really hard to put all that together. Number 2, Jarrett playing? What could that look like? It's year 2, maybe not right this second is the time for him to actually be hitting the floor and playing, as we've talked about, and as I just did with my rotation prediction. But everybody wants to know when he's going to play. So first of all, for those who've never heard it, my stance on his minutes this season is he's going to play more than last year. Even though I just went through the whole rotation, he wasn't in it. That 10-man rotation is not going to play every game. In fact, someone from that 10-man rotation probably will miss every game at some point. It's very rare to have all of your top 10 healthy and available. So Jarrett will play more last year because last year's Pacers had a lot of guys I've already mentioned, right? Jordan Nwora was in front of him at times last season. Doug McDermott came into the mix and was in front of him at times last season. Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown, gone, right? The grouping of players is just different. They had 2 backup 5s. That wasn't an option. Now, That's all sorted out. Jarace Walker's ahead. There's no vets in front of him. There's different backup fives that he should be ahead of. He's still probably the 11th guy for a 10-man rotation. He's out. But any injury, you could easily get him in there. A point guard is hurt. Andrew Nembhard slides down. All of a sudden, there's an open wing spot. In comes Jarace Walker. If a 2 guard gets hurt, Ben Shepherd moves down. In comes Jarace Walker as your reserve 3. If a 3 gets hurt, Jarace Walker plays as a 3. If a 4 gets hurt, Jarace Walker plays as a 4. If a 5 gets hurt, maybe James Wiseman plays. Maybe Obi Toppin becomes your backup 5, and Jarace Walker becomes your backup 4. It's so much easier to get him on the floor, especially if he plays well. So the surprise could be that he's just awesome in camp. And they're like, yep, right away, backup 3. Sorry, Ben Shepherd, that stinks. But I don't anticipate that. It's possible that that happens, though, because of what he could be. And so a potential surprise, I don't know if it'd be like stunning. Surprise could be him playing at some point this season. And I still think he'll sniff and or hit 50 to 60 games just because of how the Pacers have shaken out in terms of the depth between Walker and the rotation specifically. If Walker's better and deserves minutes and Shepherd's worthy of minutes and Mathurin's playing better, could Aaron Nesmith play less? I don't think so. I would not have that be the case. Last year, I kept trying to sneak Aaron Nesmith into the rotation any way I could. Remember, that was a discussion. Who's not going to play? McConnell, Nesmith, Walker? Turns out it was McConnell and Walker. Either way, Nesmith, the way he can shoot, his defense, he's so productive. I would be playing him close to as much as last year, if not more. But, people have talked about making $11 million per year long-term of the team. How do you kind of keep Aaron Nesmith out there? How does that break for the rest of the team? It's tough to really say what that could be. Could that be him playing 26 minutes, 25? Shift those to Nembhard, shift those to Mathurin, shift those to someone else. I suppose that's a possibility, but I personally would not be doing that because I'm quite a fan of what Aaron Nesmith contributes to the Pacers. This is just a note about a surprise and how things could shake differently, but I just typed McConnell, Mathurin, weirdness. Not weirdness in that they shouldn't be playing or their minutes seem funky, but how is this all going to work? They have a lot of guards. They have a lot of guards who require the ball to be their best. How do they put all this together? I think that could lead to someone playing a little less or having the ball a little less than currently it's easy to anticipate and put together. And I would not anticipate that being either of the 2 guys that I just mentioned in the Mathurin McConnell weirdness. But I would say that those are the 2 guys that it's kind of easiest to swing their role in a way that changes things. So maybe that's Mathurin being a 3 instead of a 2, and then Shepherd's role shifts, or Shepherd comes in earlier, and then Mathurin plays with different groups. But if their minutes break out the way that it looks like, it's very obvious the lineups they play with kind of can't function correctly, especially if they're going to play 2 stars together. So how that clicks all together could be not surprising, but just maybe look different than it seems right this second. And then my last note of is it's just 3 players with slashes in between them. It says Wiseman, Furphy, and Swider. Swider, if he makes the team, he can shoot. Do they want to sniff putting a shooter in there if injuries become a thing? Lots of other teams, the Lakers and the Heat, have done that at times when he was on those rosters. I haven't even said Johnny Furphy's name. He is on the roster. He does, in fact, have a 4-year contract. Could they find a way to play him at all in the rotation? Almost certainly no. He would have to be having an exceptional season for that to happen. But could he play well enough that he sneaks his way into hey, someone's hurt, they should play Johnny Furphy. He can shoot it. Maybe. Shooting's really valuable. He showed that he can get them up at Summer League, and that's one of the stats that translates the best from Summer League to the NBA. And James Wiseman, I just talked about this reality of, maybe if someone gets hurt, Obi Toppin becomes the backup 5 and Jarace's backup 4. I suppose that's possible, but then what's James Wiseman doing? You still need emergency depth at the big man spot, but I just wonder what it's going to look like for him. I have said that I think Isaiah Jackson's going to be the backup 5. I've read a lot of comments suggesting people think Wiseman could or should be. I don't agree with that, but I do wonder what they envision his role being when the season starts and when that all shakes out. And could that be the surprise if he's impressive in camp? Heck yeah, he's the only new player right now with previous NBA experience. Cole Swider could join that group if he makes the roster, but Wiseman's the only one who got guaranteed money who falls into that category for the Pacers. If he comes in and he's fast and he's dunking and his defense is better, maybe he's the backup 5, and that's the surprise. Those are my rotational thoughts for the Pacers this year. The starters, the bench, how I would organize who comes in when, who doesn't, and how it all shakes out for the minutes with potential things that could throw us off from seasons past. Tomorrow, first player interview of the summer, Micah Potter of the Utah Jazz, but more importantly, of Team USA, who just spent a ton of time with Tyrese Haliburton, is going to join to talk about that experience, watching that Team USA team, watching how Haliburton fit in, a great story about a drill with him and LeBron and Anthony Edwards that I loved. You guys will love it too. And then Friday, we'll start a series about the best seasons by position for the Pacers with the point guard spot. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East, and the show is there at Locked On Pacers. That's the best way to reach me, as is commenting on this if you're watching on X. Hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers with Micah Potter. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.